Before we all had to quarantine at home, we were getting our project together so we could be presented in an art exhibition. Some of you might remember the one we had last year in this big gallery that our work was in with all the other art pieces. And even though we won't be able to finish our project that way this year, I want to help us imagine what it would have looked like, because there were lots of different parts of it, and imagining it together will help us remember how all of these parts come together, whether it's drawing or making sculpture or just planning out space. You might remember we went to the Field Museum. That was one of the last things we did, and you might have noticed how the different objects were displayed. So these bugs behind glass, and dinosaurs, actual bones on pedestals or behind plexiglass cases. And you started to make some display cases for the objects that we were collecting as well. So I'm really glad that you got a chance to go to the Field Museum and see these. We also spent time in your own school neighborhood by going on field trips to Cook Brothers and Burlington. We did a lot of exploring there, including our employee interviews, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. But we found things as well, we bought things, and we took pictures along the way. So sometimes we just took pictures, and sometimes we took the objects with us. And in this case, this is a spark plug that we took a photograph of. I can't remember which one of you took it, but we took this and we took the object with us. So in class, you made different kinds of boxes and backgrounds for the objects, sort of like display cases that we saw in the museum. This is a shark toy that somebody made a really cool display case for. Here's another thing that we found on the street that was part of a car light. And you guys painted, I think a couple of you painted this really cool pedestal that we put it on and made it kind of look like something else. Made people curious about it. There were also some clear boxes that you made, and we were thinking about what to put in there. I know we bought some food, and this might seem strange or silly, but it also makes people wonder, why is that food there? What makes this food so special? What kind of story does this tell? We bought a lot of other objects too, like this one, and we talked about how to arrange them. So I'm wondering if this helps express how we might have felt when we made these decisions together about what to buy and what it meant and what it told people about our trip. So here's another arrangement. You can think about how you like to see these things and what kind of story it tells. So we try to talk about how our space in the exhibition would be the shape of where we went. So there's the map of the school. It's kind of a map that shows the school, the path that we took to the two stores, and like a floor plan, like a map. But actually this was done on the floor of your classroom. And these squares represent where we were and where we went. So I think we also were talking about walls, and we started to paint these walls to look like the grass that surrounds your school and the fencing around it. So think about what it would look like to show some of these spaces within these walls or in front of these objects that we bought. What kind of story would this tell? What does it mean when we take these objects that we bought and put them in front of this space that's supposed to represent where we were going to school and where we spent time? So you can have fun arranging a lot of these things. I'm wondering what you think about this and how these things might fit together. So we can play with things and how they're arranged to make it inviting to people and curious, make people curious to want to find out more. So we're showing our experiences of where we went and what we found, but also how we felt about it. And I think when we first went to Cook Brothers, we were all a little bit nervous about how employees would respond to being interviewed. So would they think we were strange? Would they think it was annoying? And I was kind of relieved when they were really open to us, and I think it was great that they answered our questions, were really nice to us. They also kind of seemed happy that we were asking them about their jobs. And Josh remembered the experience as a happy one, so he drew a rainbow to go with the portrait he made of him with the security guard that he interviewed. We also took photos, and some of you made portraits of the people that we met, and here's a few more people with portraits. And here are some of the results from the interviews that you did with the people that worked at Cook Brothers and Burlington. And you can pause here and look at this a little bit more if you'd like to. You also painted some pegboard. Here's a close-up as well I know we talked about hanging things on it, and if we were having the exhibition in real space, we could hang the interviews on it so that people could pick them up and read them. So remember at the Field Museum, there were parts of the exhibit that we were allowed to touch and feel, and so I'm going to think about that. And also, other things that could be hung on it. It could be used as a background for other objects. Since we're probably only going to be able to show our work online for now, what if we just use it as a background for the interviews for people to look at? So let me know if you can think of any other ideas too. And one last thing. A couple of you had time to make drawings of owls, one of your school symbols. And this drawing has areas that are not colored in and some that are partially erased, which I love. It gives me the impression that it's in motion. And I even love how the building's not completely colored in. I can appreciate the pencil lines and the bluish areas that really remind me of the glass that's so much a part of your school building. Here's another one, this owl in flight. His wingspan is so long and it almost reminds me of a flag. And I really like how it takes up the length of the page. I think both of these are really great. And I really appreciate how both of them are really different from each other. Miss Bullis and I were talking about that, and we were talking about using your owl portraits or copies of them inside the space that represents your school here. So here's how it might look with the two that are already finished, and I'm wondering if we could add more. I can show you a few examples you can make with collage too if you don't want to draw. In any case, it would be great to have a grid of these owls, portraits, all these portraits together, however we decide to show them. I want to show you a few other ways you could make an owl. I know some of you might want to draw, some of you might be sick of drawing at this point and want to just try something else. So I want to show you a few collages, and these are made of cut paper, things that you might have around the house. I had some magazines. I also happen to have some paper that I dyed, if you've seen that vegetable dye video that I made. So some of that is in here as well, but there's mostly just paper cut out of magazines. So what I did is I asked my family if they wanted to help and make a few owls, and they did. And so here's one, and you can see different things going on here. They're all a little bit different. You can see pages from the magazine, and like I said, the watercolor paper. This one was done all out of, well, almost all out of the paper that has been dyed with vegetables. And this one looks a little fierce, a little more maybe like an eagle or another type of animal, and that's fine too. And here is a very silly one that my daughter made. So she added some human features, some human feet and hands, and also did a whole bunch of other things that are going on here. She's got things drawn on, she's got fish and water and a whole scene, and this owl is actually dreaming or thinking about something. And here's another one, maybe perhaps a little more traditional. And you can see how this person used a little bit of hair that they cut out of a picture of somebody and some fabric and made it kind of look like feathers. This owl's in flight. And so you see how they're all really, really different. And I have some pictures over here that I cut out as sort of reference materials. And so you might be able to find some things online and have that be kind of inspiration for what you're making. But you don't have to follow it exactly. So that's kind of the point, is that these are all going to be different. And what I love about that is that, I'm asking you to make an example, an owl, that is symbolic of you or that represents you. And personally, I feel like when people ask me to do something like that, I can be a little annoyed or scared or irritated because, I'm kind of moody. I don't always feel the same way every day. So if I'm going to make something that represents me, it's not going to represent all of me, and that's okay. So that's why I like the fact that these are all a little bit different, and that this one's really, really silly, and that they don't all look exactly like owls. So you can make one that represents you today, and it doesn't have to be the same as what might represent you tomorrow. And you can make one every day if you want to. So I just wanted to show you that all those differences are great, and that you can play around with it and be goofy if you want. And I have some pieces here that I started to cut out. a little bit larger so you could see them if I'm going to do it here for you. So I'm going to put this down for a second. So I cut out a lot of wings and I cut out this face kind of large. I was thinking of going for something like this. So I was looking at this owl in flight and noticing that the head looked really big and you didn't see much of the body. So I was thinking something kind of like that. So I grabbed this face and then I thought that the eyes looked a little, I don't know, maybe a little more fierce than I wanted them to look. So I'm gonna go ahead and play with that and see if that changes it up a little bit, or maybe it looks a little bit more like an owl. And then I'm gonna take this that I cut out and have that be sort of like these feathers of the tail behind the owl as it's flying. And I cut this out. This is like part of a tree that I cut up and made look a little bit like legs. And then I have these claws. And so I'm not gluing this down right now. I'm just kind of placing things for you to look at, to kind of play with ideas. So I cut out all these different wings. And one thing I thought about as I was cutting them was that if I used these as wings, I was thinking about the drawing that Stacy did where she had erased part of the first wings that she drew on her bird, and how when I could still see the partially erased drawing, that it made it kind of look like the wings were in motion, like they used to do with cartoons or kind of drawings, or trying to imply motion. So I thought, well, what if I could do that with, cutting these wings out? Is there a way I could do that? Should they be under here? Should they be up here? I have these. This is a slightly different color, different shades of blue. Would something like that work to imply or to make, people think that the bird was flying? And you might notice that this piece and this piece are sanded. So what I did is I took a little bit of sandpaper, and you can see this has been used quite a bit. So I don't know, if you happen to have sandpaper around, this is something that you can play with, and it's kind of fun to do with like magazine pages or any kind of paper you want to either rough it up or create kind of a line or a pattern in it. If you don't have sandpaper laying around, because not everybody does, you can see if your mom or dad has a nail file, and this will work, maybe not as well, but if you're doing smaller areas, you can use this to sand it. So there's this kind of thing that I think is kind of fun to help, you can take something that's a found material like paper that has a pattern or a color in it, and you can alter it and change it to make it a little bit more what you want. Another way that I use sandpaper with this is I actually sanded a little bit of the bottom of this part because I wanted it was hot pink, the whole thing was solid pink, and I wanted it to look like it had a little bit of a texture to it or a fade, or kind of like imply the idea of feathers. So I played with that a little bit. So these are all things that you can do to create your owl, and it would be really great if you want to draw it, that's great too, but this gives you an option if you want to do it another way. Or if you want to get really silly with it, you can do that. If you want to make more than one, that would be cool too. I have no problem with that. And, even if you didn't want to get as silly as this one, you could take the idea of combining collage with drawing, which is what she did. So these are all options for you. And I hope that you can take this and run with it and maybe take pictures and send it back to me. And we will take all of these owls, and not these, but the ones you guys make, and put them in your floor plan of your school.